Okay, so some people will say regarding the minimum wage hikes on fast food restaurants, well, that's not supposed to be a career. To which I would say, if you're working full time, you should be able to make a living. And if your business model does not allow for that, you have a failed business model. That's one. Two, a lot of people who are going into working in fast food and places like that, in the past, they would have worked in factories. Now we've been deindustrialized. Those factory jobs don't exist anymore. And if you know the history of labor, they unionized so that those factory jobs eventually became good jobs that you could raise a family on. They are attempting to do the same thing with the fast food industry because, for good or for ill, those are the jobs our economy is generating at this point. But here are people that I don't think anyone would say they want high turnover amongst. If you fly on planes, among their responsibilities is not just to bring you your little duty sized bottle of wine, but it's also to help you get your oxygen mask on in case of an emergency. Flight attendants are facing homelessness and hunger. Kay had already worked a full day when Frontier Airlines called her to pick up a shift. The recently hired flight attendant had been awake since 4 a.m. driving Lyft, one of the few side gigs she could manage with her unpredictable schedule. Her new career was off to a rough start. There were 3.5 weeks of unpaid training. Her first few paychecks were lower than she'd anticipated. She gave up her apartment in Atlanta, where median rent is about $1,500, and had been renting a room from a friend. The only way to make ends meet, she said, was to juggle all the gig work she could find: Instacart shopping, pet sitting, Lyft driving. The rideshare company was offering a $500 bonus for completing 120 rides in 4 days. With her projected pay of $23,000 a year before taxes and insurance, that's only a little better than Shake Shack money.
Yeah.
Chasing the extra money felt necessary. Hang on, I thought this was all about whether the job was a career or important or for high school kids. There's flight attendants making the same money, almost like it's a function of capitalism.
Yes, and most minimum wage earners, by the way, are 25 or older. It's a
Yep.
myth that it's
Yep.
teenagers' first job.
Right.
A
Right. And a
majority,
lot, and a lot, and a
55%
lot of,
are
a lot,
25 or older.
a lot of single mothers too.
Yes, the
Uh,
average age of a minimum wage worker, which is the mean, so that's not the median, but the mean, because yes, a lot of single moms, is actually 35,
right. So
not
after
15. Yeah,
not 15, right? Maybe back in 1958,
yeah.
it was. So after working for Frontier from 3 p.m. to 10 p.m., Kay turned back to Lyft. By the time she reached the bonus, she'd gone nearly 24 hours without sleep. New flight attendants like Kay learn that although their work has been deemed essential to the transportation infrastructure, it's hard to stay afloat. A complicated pay structure that prioritizes hours in the air and entry level wages that are on par with service industry jobs makes it difficult for many to turn the job into a career. Quote, I have to supplement my income, but then I'm also not sleeping, said Kay, who spoke on the condition that she be identified only by the name she uses outside of work because she fears retaliation from her employer. Quote, we're expected to save people on the plane and we're not getting paid a living wage. Now, I want to ask you honestly, if you were told that the flight attendants in China have to go 24 hours without sleep because that's what they make them do, what would you say? God, that's horrible. That's a horrible system. Well, that is what our system is producing, and that's dangerous. We had the two railroad workers on here
Oh yeah,
during the strike, and they were talking about how the company is so greedy. You've got two workers for a mile of train, an
right.
entire mile long train. You got two guys
Yep,
working. Does that sound safe to you? Does that
yep.
sound safe? Does this not sound like a safety issue that you have a flight attendant who's expected to help passengers in an emergency who hasn't slept for 24 hours? That's dangerous, right?
Of course.
Kay is not alone. Most new flight attendants work on reserve, spending days waiting to be assigned flights. It's common for them to take side jobs: bartenders, semi truck drivers, makeup artists, church musicians. Some say they are struggling to feed their families and are living out of their cars. In interviews with 18 current or former flight attendants, workers recounted dire financial situations, assault on the job from unruly passengers, and mental health crises. They shared similar stories: paychecks much smaller than expected, quickly falling behind on bills, spiraling into debt. For decades, Hollywood and media have glamorized flight attendants for a fast paced, globe trotting lifestyle. In reality, their story mirrors the income inequality in other global industries that rely on blue collar workers. Last year, homelessness in America was at a record high and appears to be worsening. So our illustrious Democratic candidate is wrong when she says that we shouldn't be maligning the great economy we have, talking down America. The industry may be at a turning point. This summer, flight attendant unions have made progress in years-long battle with airlines over better wages and retirement benefits, among other issues. Tentative labor agreements have reached the bargaining table, but not been voted through by union members. Threats to strike keep coming, even if an actual stoppage has to be approved by federal mediators. America's largest flight attendants union, the Association of Flight Attendants, CWA-AFA, said in a recent news release that many members working with Alaska Airlines have reported financial insecurity, including some that have experienced homelessness, lived in their car, lived in a shelter, or endured some combination of these circumstances. An employment verification letter from American Airlines showing a projected starting pay of $27,315 per year recently went viral, with some calling it a poverty verification letter that could be used to apply for government assistance programs like food stamps. American confirmed the letter reflects the current base rate for first-year flight attendants on reserve without premiums or incentives. Quote, as a passenger, you don't really see those things, said Rebecca Owens, a flight attendant with Alaska Airlines. You see the smiling, happy flight attendants that are doing anything to survive, but still bringing their best selves to work. It's a lot to really comprehend. And here, we see the starting pay at different airlines and what the top rate pay is. So Frontier 22,950, JetBlue, which because they have an all Airbus fleet, is my only choice for domestic travel. But some of those flight attendants are getting 24,255. And the most you can ever make there is 58,167. And I didn't include this, but the article is pretty lengthy and it gets into detail. To get that top pay scale usually takes about 12 years.
Yeah, and that's not enough to live. And by live, I mean like live with a modicum of comfort and be able to save a little bit of money to someday improve your economic prospects, which is the whole sell of capitalism. Capitalism is about expansion, it's about growth, it's about opportunity, right? But that is for the capitalists. That is not for the laborers. That's not for the laborers. That's why it's called capitalism, because the way to win at capitalism is to get capital and use capital to create more capital. People who work for an hourly wage are not capitalists, and capitalism is not designed to benefit them. You are not actually a part of the system. You are the stuff that capitalists use to feed into the system, and when they're done, they spit you out. In the article we went over with Shama Sawant, because her demand is $25 minimum wage for workers strike back, the cheapest state in the country to live in is, I believe, either North Dakota, Wyoming, like, one of those very rural states that I don't recall exactly which one. But the least expensive state to actually live and be able to save a little bit and improve your situation is 80 grand. 80 grand a year for a single person.
Right.
So what?
Right.
Top rate. So basically what you're saying is if you serve peanuts on an airplane or you help people get their face masks on an airplane, if something happens with the cabin pressure, whatever, you do not have access to the American dream. That's basically what it is, right? This system is for the few people who actually use capital to create more capital. If you work for a living, the system is not designed to benefit you. It is not designed to benefit you. This is not a failure of the system. This is a perfection of the system over the course of hundreds of years, where they have been able to shut workers out and make workers grateful for the fact that they've been shut out somehow.
Well, this is a return to form. You had this brief period where after the Depression, after the New Deal, where workers had more power than they've ever had in the history of the world over their working conditions. And gradually, the capitalists are clawing that back. They have clawed it back, and it's been very much the frog in the pot of boiling water, going back to Reagan firing the air traffic controllers. That's when this peasant shit happened. That's when this peasant mind happened. Because I remember I was precocious. I was very young, but I was precocious enough that I still remember this because it was everywhere. It was very pervasive in the media that people were cheering the firing of the airline.
Yeah.
People had already kind of been set up to think that way. You go back, I would love to do a video essay on, Death Wish and Dirty Harry and all that, the way these things were really setting up that reactionary mindset. Because you look at a lot of the monologues they gave those characters in these 70s vigilante movies, and it's like you're listening to a Bill O'Reilly monologue.
Right.
Like they were really setting people up for that. I always remember this. There was this Clint Eastwood bare knuckle boxing movies, Every Which Way But Loose, and then the sequel was Any Which Way You Can. And in Any Which Way You Can, Sandra Locke was the love interest, and she says, "I don't take handouts." He says, "Handouts what the government gives you. I'm offering you a hand up."
Right.
Like the whole Fox News mindset was being implanted. And then with the Reagan Revolution, it exploded. Like it's funny, if you go back and you look at that now, you say, well, they should have seen Reagan coming. Like it was clearly that kind of a backlash against the Great Society was brewing in the zeitgeist. It was just waiting for a figure to really enact it. All right, so that is so Delta apparently is not unionized, and I guess because they want to keep the union out, they pay a little more. But it's still nothing to write home about. Time outside of flying hours, the time spent at the airport boarding and deplaning, is either unpaid or paid at a fraction of the hourly rate. Now, this is like people who work in restaurants where the setup is not paid. You got to go in there and set up the restaurant. Now, Delta, one of the reasons their pay scale is higher is because they pay half the hourly rate, which is princely compared to the rest of the industry for that time.
Right. For
quote, "It's pretty common to work 6 hours of flight time, but you're actually working for 12 to 14 hours, said Rich Henderson, a flight attendant of more than a decade who runs the Two Guys on a Plane meme account with his husband. "We have a lot of time at work we don't get paid. The system is legal. Flight attendants and other aviation workers are exempt from the Fair Labor Standards Act because their job is essential to the economy. Hedrick says the practice started a long time ago. When flight attendants came into unions, quote, "We just started getting paid the same way as pilots did," she said. Several flight attendants who spoke to the Post say they're angry that they make less than they would working comparable hours at a fast food restaurant, despite their extensive safety responsibilities, regular training, and demanding lifestyle. Quote, "This is a problem across the country," Nelson said. "The basic standard and social contract that if you work full time, you can get a living wage, healthcare, retirement, and actually have time to spend with your families, that has been eroded in the airline industry, the same as it's been eroded everywhere else." The median pay for airline and commercial pilots is $171,210. Last year, Alaska's CEO made more than $10 million. The CEOs for Delta and American each made more than $31 million. AFA is currently bargaining with 14 carriers over flight attendant contracts. So, just like in the fast food industry, you have CEOs being paid hundreds of times more than these workers, while claiming that they're not making enough money to pay people properly to do these jobs. This is what people have to understand. This is what I mean when I say depeasantize your mind. People have been conditioned again to think the economy works like a lemonade stand. It does not. It does not. It works like a big Ponzi scheme where the people at the top, the investor class in Wall Street, are sucking up all of the wealth to themselves. It's not that the money is not there to properly pay people. It's that people have been so beaten down that they have forgotten how to demand that money. Power will concede nothing without a demand. You must demand it. These workers, frankly, should go on strike. You could cripple the nation. You could cripple the world economy if they went. They can't fly without flight attendants. They have that power. Workers have been so conditioned at this point not to take those actions, but they have to. They have to. We have to return to that kind of militant labor action across all industries. This is not just fast food. It's not just quote unquote burger flippers. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. And the more you blame workers for asking for more, the worse they're going to make it, until you're living in a Japanese style convenience hotel as your apartment with a bed and a TV.
Yeah.
And then you'll be complaining about the workers who want a bathroom.
Yeah, no, look, for people who thought I was a little bit too dark and blackpilled a couple streams back, which I don't really consider that to be a dark prediction for the future, by the way. The United States as a political entity no longer wielding the kind of power or influence over the world. I actually think that's a good thing, but that's a conversation for a different time. If you want what I think is absolutely necessary, there needs to be at this point a general strike. That's the next big thing that the left should try to organize, a general work stoppage. Because you come up with a list of 5 core demands: minimum wage increase, free health care, slashing of the military budget, arms embargo to Israel. You can come up with anything. They don't have to be labor oriented. I mean, obviously, most of them should be, but they could be. We're not going to work until Israel is cut off. No more weapons. Until then, a third of the workforce is not showing up. Well, you'll see these politicians cater to they'll cave pretty quickly. They'll cave pretty quickly when their money is on the line. And so that is what we need. That is my strong feeling. That you really are not going to be able to fight back against this without that. That is necessary.
Right. And people ask a lot, what are you for? Well, that is what we are for. I think.
And if that fucking Barney Rubble looking motherfucker over there at the UAW is serious about organizing one in 2028, then yeah, I mean, it's going to take all hands on deck. You know what I mean?
Yes. And this is why we're very often asked why we don't get behind this electoral project or that electoral project. Again, we'd love to, but our experience, and there are behind the scenes things that I can't talk about, but my experiences have done nothing to disabuse me of my basic notion about a lot of these political parties, movements, and candidates.
I love you, but you are not serious people.
That is our experience, and that is why we don't get behind anybody, because it's our energy needs to go towards things like this.
Yeah. Yeah, there needs to be a general strike, 100%.
That Shama really speaks for. That's why we've always supported her insofar as we support anybody. That's why we'd like to go cover the conference she plans on having in February. But I think a lot of these things, I'm sorry, man, they enrich their principal figures. A lot of these people are millionaires who are in those positions without naming any names. And, there's no reason to encourage our audience to get involved in things like that when their energy could be better. Hey, we've encouraged getting involved with Worker Strike Back.
Right. Of course.
It's not, we're not black belt like, no, don't do anything, just sit and die. But you have to be strategic. You have to be strategic. There are a lot of efforts out there that are more cosplaying than real.
Please clap.